Welcome to Wilderness Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about water! Definitely just got some in my boot. In this experiment, I have some boiling water in a glass container. I have a glass jar and I have a lid with some ice cubes in it. I also have an aerosol spray. I'm going to pour some of the hot water into the jar, swish it around so the edges get kind of warm, and then I'm going to throw the ice cube filled lid on top and just let it sit for about 20 to 30 seconds. So when water is boiled, it starts to turn into a gas, vapor. And then when it cools from the ice, it condenses, which is then what turns it back into this liquidy stuff around the edges. And now I'm going to make it really condense into a cloud. So I'm going to just take the lid off quickly and spray a little bit in there and then put the lid back on. This gives the vapor something to collect onto so that it creates almost like a cloud. You can see it forming. I'm going to let it keep sitting so the water vapor can keep attaching itself onto the pieces of the spray I just sprayed in. Alright, now that it has sat for about a minute with the aerosol spray in it, I'm going to take off the lid of ice and watch as the cloud that formed is released from the jar. Let's talk about how water works in the world. When you have a body of water like this one, a lake, a river, the ocean, when it gets hot outside or the sun shines, the water vaporizes, so it turns to a gas, and it becomes kind of like part of the air almost, and it floats up just like we saw in the jar. It floats up and causes steam. So that's when you see steam if you're boiling water. That's kind of what evaporation is like. After the water evaporates, the water in the air attaches itself to particles like dust and things in the air. And then that's how clouds form. So all these little droplets are all attached together because of dust particles and other things in the air. So that's how a cloud would form. On a rainy day like today, that's because the cloud gets so heavy it can't hold any more water and it needs to let go of all the excess water. And so it rains all the rain back down on us, and that's how we get more water. And that's kind of the basic water cycle. In the jar that I showed you, there was the water in the bottom that was hot. As that evaporated or turned to a gas, we could see it kind of forming in the jar, kind of steaming around and things. And then, with the ice on top, that caused it to condense or kind of come together, turn into a cloud. But first, it needed the particles from the spray in order to come together like that. So basically, it was hot, it evaporated, and then it attached itself to the particles and then cooled and turned into those big clouds. And if we had let it hold for long enough, or if there was enough particles in the air, eventually it would all of the cloudiness would dissipate or go away, fall apart, and almost rain back down into the water. And so that's how the water cycle works, and that's how that demonstration shows how the cycle works. Now, water, as we talked about last week, I'll remind you that water is the most important thing for life to exist. So, if we're in a survival situation like I was last week, how do we take advantage of the water system and get the water that we need to drink? First of all, I should update you on last week's situation. Turned out I wasn't actually that far from camp's main site, and you know, they eventually found me right after I had finished making my shelter, and you know, I wasn't that far from the path, turns out, but since I hadn't gone anywhere, it was easy to find me. Let's remind ourselves of what we talked about last week. There are 4 main things that will contribute to successful survival in the wild. So there's shelter. We need to have shelter first. Next, and not far behind, we need to find water to keep us alive. Then fire, and then food. Remember, we can go a few weeks without food, but we can only go a couple of days without water. So today we're on the mission to find water. One way is by finding moss like this. Moss holds a lot of water in it. If you pick it up, you can even squeeze water out. Now, if you have a few supplies at your disposal, or if you're able to use a few things, or if you're in an emergency at home, there are a few different ways that you can collect water. This is called a solar still. I started this collection a while ago when I knew it would be sunny because it's been pretty rainy lately. So I took an ice cream pail, but you can use any plastic container or glass, any container basically that will have a lid that seals tightly. So I have this ice cream container. Inside of it I have some plastic wrap covering the top, just like that. And then I actually have a rock forming a little dip in the plastic wrap. So it hangs down. And inside I have a jar sitting in the bucket, in the pail. And I've actually managed to collect a few, about a half an inch or an inch of water in this jar. So I can drink this. Let me tell you how I collected it. When I made this, I actually picked leaves from around the field. I chose a lot of dandelions and some grass, and I placed them in the bottom. Now they have to be fresh green leaves, not dry leaves, because those will hold the most water. The green leaves hold the most water. Then you put the empty, clean jar inside of the bucket with the leaves in it. Then you cover the whole mouth of the bucket with your plastic wrap. Now, then you put your rock onto the plastic wrap so that it forms a little dip in it. I don't know if you can see that, but it forms a little dip so that when the water collects onto the plastic wrap, it then runs down, and at the peak or the bottom of the plastic wrap, it drips into your container. So you want the rock to be placed basically at the mouth of the jar on the inside, or the collection container on the inside. And then I popped the lid on so that the plastic wrap stays. You can use other things other than plastic wrap as long as it's like a plastic type material. So you can use a plastic bag of some sort. I just used plastic wrap because it worked the best for me because I could choose what size I needed. And then you have this, and you would place this bucket out in the sunshine, and as the sun beats down on it, the leaves release water, because that's another way that the atmosphere around us gets water. The leaves will release this water that's inside of them into the container, and it will sort of, the plastic wrap acts as the particles that the water will attach to. So the water particles in the air will attach to this plastic wrap that's inside, and then they all attach together and create little water droplets, and then those water droplets fall down the plastic wrap into my collection container, and voila, then I have drinking water. You can also do this by putting water inside this bucket instead of plant material. But I used plant material that I knew was edible plants so that I wouldn't have to clean the water as much afterwards. I knew it would be pretty safe to drink right away. Whereas if I chose water from the lake to still, then I would need to boil it first in case there were any bugs or anything in it. Another version of a still you could make, if you didn't have plastic wrap to droop down the middle, is using a plastic bottle. You could use a water bottle, you could use a big pop bottle, anything like that. Cut it mostly in half. You may need to put a little slit in it so that you can fit it inside. And you also need any sort of container that can fit inside. I used a tin can. So you would put the tin can in the middle of the bottom part of this plastic container. Fill that with your leaf matter or with other water, or less clean water, I would say. And then you would fit the top half of your bottle onto the bottom half. So I just kind of slid it in there. And then if you have access to it, tape with an easily removable tape, so not duct tape, but probably like Scotch tape type of thing, all the way around the edges. You're going to need to be able to remove it so that you can drink the water that stills inside. And then same thing, you leave this out in the sunshine, and then the water will collect on the sides, same as with the other water collection styles. It'll collect onto the sides and condense up there and then drip down, and then your drinkable water will be in the bottom of this container, and the undrinkable water came from the can. One note that I would make about this is to watch that you don't have any gaps along this where these meet, but also be sure that you put the top part inside the bottom part so you're not losing any water in this edge, because if this went over top, then you would have water able to either get caught or drip out from here. But if the top part is inside the bottom, then you're not going to get as much water loss. And remember, in God's wilderness, we are set apart, but still together. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.